These are 17 books and courses for learning to write music that I keep recommending over and over again. Links to everything will be in the description. Let's start with orchestration. Before you can really get good at writing music for an orchestra, there's a lot you need to learn about all of the different instruments, what they are, how they sound, what they can do, what they can't do. I've read a ton of orchestration and instrumentation books, and the best one for learning about the instruments is The Study of Orchestration by Samuel Adler. It's incredibly detailed. There are recordings of live musicians, of all the examples. It's one of those books you can keep near your desk and reach for again and again. This is the book we used when I studied film scoring at Berklee, and every so often I'll still browse through it because it's just so jam-packed with information. The Study of Orchestration is excellent for learning about the instruments, but after you read it, you'll still be left a bit wanting for what to actually do with them. There are two incredible courses to help with this. The first is Orchestrating the Line by Elaine Mirand, which can be found on Score Club. This course teaches you how to think horizontally and linearly instead of just stacking layers on top of each other. Before I took this course, I never really appreciated all the small details, like how you might want to add a third trumpet just on one particular beat to give it a little extra accent. The course is brilliant. I recommend it to everyone. And this is actually the course that helped me go from always writing in Logic to composing in notation, which I'm grateful for. Another amazing orchestration course that is more recent is Secrets of Orchestration by Ravshan Asgarzadeh. The course starts by going into incredible detail about how to voice balanced chords across all sections, before getting into how to use those voicings for different textures. When I say incredible detail, I mean like there's a 47-minute lecture just on how to voice triads between flutes and bassoons. So it takes a long time to get through all the voicing lessons, but it pays off because Ravshan has a brilliant approach to applying these voicings to different textures and layers, and it's amazing how you can instantly apply his techniques to get a full and rich orchestral sound. Ravshan has a YouTube channel called Secrets of Orchestration if you want to get a sense of what the course is like. Again, highly, highly recommend. Just be careful, there are two courses with the exact same name. There's an old, inexpensive one and a newer, more expensive one. And perhaps, unfortunately, you want the more recent one because that's the one just chock full of valuable information. And last in the orchestration category is one more book. I mentioned that the Samuel Adler book is great for learning the instruments, but there's another book that I think is better for the more broad topic of how to think about orchestration. Creative Orchestration by George Frederick Mackay talks about things like balancing the sections, contrast and unity, more artistic and conceptual ideas beyond like, this is the lowest note of the flute. Early on, when I started this channel, I made a series on Mackay's 8 orchestral textures. They're a bit old and rough around the edges, but I'll put a card up here to it if you want to check those out. Let's move on to composition. Kind of in the same way that the last book is more conceptual, there's a fantastic book called Musical Composition by Alan Belkin. There are things Alan writes about in this book that I've never seen anywhere else, such as how to think about giving extra emphasis to the beginnings and endings of sections, or how to foreshadow an idea, so when we get to the fully fleshed out form, it feels new, but somehow inevitable. This is also the book that inspired my gaps and bumps method of giving feedback, which has been super valuable as a teacher. Alan also has a YouTube channel with amazingly useful videos for composers, so be sure to check that out as well. I have one more Score Club course on this list, which is Practical Counterpoint. A lot of students tell me that they know they should learn counterpoint, but then everything is 18th century music that they have absolutely no interest in. Elaine's course is called Practical Counterpoint because he presents it in a way you'll actually use. He's a film composer and he teaches counterpoint in the way that he uses it in his work. He still uses the traditional species method that has been going strong for hundreds of years, but again, it's in a more approachable way that you'll feel like you can use in modern styles for film and video game music, not just Baroque fugues. Honestly, everything on Score Club is great, but Practical Counterpoint and Orchestrating the Line stand out as my favorites. And this is not on my list of 17, but I feel like I have to mention real quick that I have my own courses, including Pillars of Composition for beginner to intermediate composers, as well as courses on how to write in the styles of Harry Potter, How to Train Your Dragon, and my collaboration with Gavin Leeper on music for anime and JRPGs. They're hosted by Master the Score, and you can find links in the description. Let's move on to harmony. I've got 5 harmony books to recommend here, each with a different focus. If you want the traditional classroom harmony experience, I'd go with Harmony and Voice Leading by Aldwell and Schachter. This will teach you trad harm in a very clear and step-by-step way. Also, good voice leading, how to read figured bass, and will bring you up to about the Romantic period. If you don't really connect with classical music and you want something more contemporary, I would check out Hooktheory. The Hooktheory books, or ebooks, I guess, use examples from pop, rock, and jazz, and they use a piano roll instead of notation. You probably know I'm somewhat of a traditionalist when it comes to this stuff and think you should learn to read and write music if you want to be a composer, but if that's a hurdle for you, I'd still rather you learn music theory, so this can be a good option. Moving back to traditional harmony, once you finish the Aldwell and Schachter, I'd move on to Contemporary Harmony by Ludmila Ulela. This book picks up roughly around the area that the other book leaves off and goes through harmony techniques used by composers like Wagner, Brahms, Debussy, Ravel, Stravinsky, all the way up to mid-20th century techniques like atonality. Unfortunately, there are no audio examples to go with the book, so actually hearing the techniques can be tricky. Still a lot of good information though. Another more contemporary harmony book to check out is 20th-Century Harmony by Vincent Persichetti, which gets into all sorts of advanced concepts like modes, chord structures based on fourths, which can give you that Joe Hisaishi sound, polytonality, etc. It's useful if you want techniques for how to make your music sound more recent than Beethoven, and it's especially useful if you want to write for film or video game music. And the last one in the harmony category is Modulation by Max Reger. This is a short and sweet book that shows you the most direct way to modulate from any key to any other key. He goes into every possible combination. I think the majority of the modulations can be reduced to just a handful of consistent techniques. I should probably make a video about it someday. Next up is musical form, my favorite category and my favorite book. If you've ever seen my videos on the period and sentence form, that all comes from a book called Analyzing Classical Form by William Kaplan. Seriously, my favorite music book ever, probably my favorite book ever. It changed composition for me. Most books on musical form start with the period and say, that's it, that's the basic musical structure from which everything else is built. But then if you go to listen to actual music, you find that there are just so many melodies that do not fit that form that they just described. And all these books just write them off as variations of the period. But Kaplan's idea, based on the work of Arnold Schoenberg, is that there are actually two distinct basic forms, the period and the sentence. The book goes into detail about the differences, and most importantly, how and why they work the way they do. It then goes on to expand on these forms all the way from 8-bar melodies up to symphonic movements and concertos. The only drawback is that the book focuses exclusively on the classical era, specifically Mozart, Haydn, and Beethoven. I like classical era music, so that's fine with me, but for some, that's a turnoff. I promise you, it's worth it anyway, even if you don't connect with that style at first. Also, the book is presented as an analysis method, not a composition book. But I adapted it to my needs in some ways that would probably annoy Kaplan, and have become such a more fluid and prolific composer thanks to this book. Analyzing Classical Form. Best book ever. If you're a bit intimidated by a textbook this thick about classical music, but you still want to learn the basics of musical form, I'd suggest Musical Structure and Design by Cedric Thorpe Davy. This is a much shorter, more introductory book to musical form, but still very good. Davy has a different theory on the two basic forms, open versus closed. He puts a lot of emphasis on whether or not a section ends with an authentic or half cadence, which is interesting and worth thinking about. Obviously, I've subscribed more to Kaplan's sentence and period approach. The book also goes on to larger forms like minuet and trio, rondo, sonata, etc. Every composer should study form. It's grossly undervalued in music education, which is a shame because it's absolutely essential. Next up are 3 books for the non-piano players among us. Even if you're not a piano player, you probably have a MIDI keyboard. Being able to play piano or keys to a basic level of competency will make your life so much easier. Just practice like 5 to 10 minutes a day. You don't need to give a recital of Rachmaninoff, but you will really benefit from learning your scales, arpeggios, and chords. For scales and arpeggios, I recommend The Virtuoso Pianist by Charles Louis Hannon. The book is intended as a way to strengthen your fingers and improve dexterity, but about halfway in, he includes exercises for scales and arpeggios. What's great about them is they have fingerings, so you can learn the proper way to play them and become fluent. Seriously, just invest a little bit of time every day and you will thank yourself. I'm not a piano player, but I am perfectly comfortable improvising and writing lines and harmonies, and basically just exploring ideas at the piano because I can play unconsciously the basic building blocks of scales and arpeggios in all 24 major and minor keys. Another skill that has been super useful for me is to have 2-5-1 progressions intuitively under my fingers. For that, I'd recommend An Introduction to Jazz Chord Voicing for Keyboard by Bill Boyd. It starts with basic 7th chord voicings and goes on to introduce tensions like 9ths and 13ths. Again, another thing that will make your life as a composer easier if you can put in the work. The last one is for when you get more advanced, which is The Well-Tempered Clavier by Johann Sebastian Bach. This is the only book on this list that is just music. It's not a textbook or analysis or anything like that, but it's like the Bible of tonal composition. If you studied this thing properly, you would change your life. It's said that Nadia Boulanger, the famous French composer and composition teacher, memorized the Well-Tempered Clavier when she was just 10 years old, and she expected her students to do the same. Those students included musical giants like Alan Copland, Quincy Jones, and Philip Glass. I'm not telling you to run out and go memorize the book, and to be perfectly honest, I've spent way less time with it than I'd like to admit, but it absolutely has to go on this list of things that will add value to your skills as a composer. I always tell myself I'll work on it someday. Okay, the last one is a bit different from all the others, and that's the music of the Lord of the Rings films by Doug Adams. Howard Shore's Lord of the Rings trilogy is considered one of the greatest achievements in film music. This book details all of the themes, goes into the music theory of why certain harmonies or modes or rhythms were chosen for different characters and settings, and is clearly written by someone who respects and loves this music. It's a beautiful book. Even just having it around and occasionally skimming through it is fun. If you're an aspiring film or video game composer or just a Lord of the Rings fan, add this one to your wish list. If I missed your favorite book or course on writing music, let us know what it is in the comments. The very first YouTube video I ever made was recommending 3 books, which were all on this list. If you want to have a laugh at how stiff and awkward I was, check it out here. That video is much shorter, so maybe it wins, I don't know. And then do me a favor and leave a comment below the like button letting me know how this video compares with that old one. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.